Hello and welcome back after the weekend to the Rex Capital channel. Welcome to today's update on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Today we're going to be focusing on only just those two because Litecoin hasn't really moved much. It hasn't really developed anything in its price action. So we'll leave Litecoin to another day. Today we're going to be focusing mostly on Bitcoin because that's where we've seen a lot of changes over the weekend. Like I said on Friday, in Friday's update, we knew that Bitcoin was going to have a very interesting weekend. We knew that a move was coming, and thankfully, it was a very fortunate and positive move. So, without further ado, let's dive right into the episode. This is the Bitcoin chart from Friday, which we covered. We spoke about the strong bullish divergence, the uptrend line on the oscillator, the RSI oscillator, and the downtrending line, denoting the lower lows on price. So essentially, this in itself is a strong bullish divergence. We spoke about this on Friday, and here is how price developed. Essentially, the green area held, the oscillator held its uptrend line, and of course we started to see some deviation from the lower low on the price action because of course the green area held. So in any case, we saw a nice reaction to the upside. And just cycling back to Friday, we spoke about this green area, it needed to hold, and that these uptrend lines needed to hold for this entire scenario to play out. But essentially speaking, we'd see compression between the green and the bottom bear flag support, which could have been a resistance, but we're not seeing that. We saw a nice break past this bear flag bottom, and essentially speaking, price has broken back into this bear flag structure. So that's all very positive. We've seen a nice move. I even thought that we could see a pullback to the bear flag bottom just to reclaim it as support officially. But at the moment, we're not really seeing that. Still a scenario that I'm open to, but in any case, I am just watching for Bitcoin just to stay above this bear flagging bottom. And if it does that, then of course, upside is very much still in the balance. It's still very much on the cards. But let's zoom out because we do have a new weekly close. Zooming out gives you that fresh perspective, and while everything is really interesting on the lower time frames because we've been looking at the 4-hour time frame so far, everything's very interesting over here because there's lots going on, but we need to zoom out for that fresh perspective. And if we look at the weekly perspective, then not much is really going on. So let me just break this down for you. For the time being, this is the range high. These are monthly levels. Remember, we've been speaking about this throughout last week. These are monthly levels, the range high of the monthly range, the range EQ, which is the midpoint of this monthly range, and the range low, which is of course the bottom of this monthly range. So what are these candles telling us? Well, this candle over here is telling us that it has a strong resistance above it. So if we just go back, the range EQ essentially is a strong resistance, and the candle over here shows us the same thing. That's being rejected. It's constantly being rejected from 8,500, roughly speaking. This is the midpoint of the monthly range. But this candle from last week is showing us that it has a good support in the range low. So the range low over here is holding strong. It is developing a higher low. So slightly a bit of a developing bullish tendency, as is the case with most higher lows. So essentially speaking, price is stuck in the bottom half of the monthly range between 7,750 to 8,500, and this is what candlestick analysis is telling us: a strong resistance in 8,500 over here and a strong support in 7,750. So we are seeing that price is stuck in the bottom half of the monthly range, and nothing's really changed in that respect. So on the weekly time frame, not much is going on. But of course, more is to be gleaned on the lower time frames, and that's where it is interesting. That's where things move a little faster, and they can give us some indication as to what we can expect in terms of future directional bias. So let's go ahead and dive into those lower time frames. So we have the bear flag. It did resolve itself last week with a breakdown, but of course we also saw a rebound from the green area, which never really lost support. And then the strong bullish divergence came into play, and then we saw a break back in to this structure. So in terms of breaking back into the structure, that's all well and good, but we need to take note that this moving average, this exponential moving average, the 200 EMA, a very important long-term gauge of investor sentiment towards Bitcoin. Last week, I don't know if you guys remember, we saw that this 200 EMA resistance was confluent with this, the top of this bear flag. But what's very interesting that with the passage of time, with the passing of time, we saw this 200 EMA actually break into the bear flag, and it's going lower and lower and lower. The longer that price was at these lower levels over here, we also saw that the 200 EMA naturally started to break down into the structure as well and started to weigh down on price. So it is following price down closer and closer to the price action of Bitcoin. So that's an interesting thing, and that's something we need to bear in mind, because the 200 EMA was confluent with the top of the bear flag last week, but this week it looks like the 200 EMA is going to be confluent with this region once again, the 8,500 resistance, the midpoint of the monthly range. So we're constantly seeing this midpoint come into action. It's constantly a level that's plaguing Bitcoin, and we are seeing some confluence in this resistance. We are seeing the 200 EMA starting to come closer to price and towards the 8,500 level. So going forward, the 8,500 level is going to still be very important. But we also have to bear in mind that the volume profile is giving us the same story. We are seeing a lot of confluence here. We're seeing a lot of confluence in resistance. Not necessarily a good sign. This is strong resistance. We're seeing resistance in the 200 EMA. We're seeing resistance in the historically transacted volume at this level. So yes, we might see a bit of a volume profile gap over here. So we might see price be able to fill that price region, this box in particular. We might see the volume gap become filled quite easily, but we are still seeing this resistance, this confluent resistance. So that's not necessarily a good thing, because there is a lot of sell side pressure for Bitcoin to press past if it really wants to break up to the upside. Because if Bitcoin wanted to reach 9,500, all it would really have to do is break past this level, this really strong resistance as we've just established. And once it does that, it has a ways to go. Really, look at this. There is just no historically transacted volume around these regions. It's just a very large volume gap until we have a bit of volume around here, which is roughly the 9,300 range, the 9,300 price level, which is, if we cycle back, that's essentially the range high of the monthly range, 9,300. So definitely some confluence there. So it's just very interesting to see all of these different time frames layer on each other, just to build a broader picture of understanding when it comes to Bitcoin's price action. So now that time has passed and price action has evolved, this technical analysis hasn't really evolved. I have been adding some incremental changes as we went along last week, episode to episode. But of course, price does evolve, time passes, and we also need to change our perspective a little bit. We need to change our technical analysis as we go along. So I'm not going to entirely scrap this bear flag and this technical analysis, because I think there is still a lot of utility here. I still feel that this can add a lot of value. So I am going to keep this. But at the same time, I do want to get a fresh perspective with the new price action that we have. So removing all the trend lines, removing all the technical analysis for the most part, we have a fresh chart, a fresh perspective, and with that come new trend lines. So we have a higher low right over here, and the best thing about this higher low is that we have 3 contacts, 4 in fact. That just adds legitimacy to this trend line. And we have this connecting to the candle bodies. Roughly speaking, this is the exception, but it is approximate. It is quite close to the candle body itself. So we are having this higher low right over here connecting to all those candle bodies for the most part, which is a very legitimate trend line. And of course, we have this higher high. But we are seeing a bear flag over here. We are seeing higher highs and higher lows. But over here, there is a slight nuance difference. You can't really call this a bear flag, even though the sentiment is the same. This is essentially an ascending broadening wedge. And the difference here isn't so much the bias, the directional bias and the sentiment that goes along with any bearish pattern, such as a rising wedge, a bear flag, or a descending triangle. An ascending broadening wedge is also a bearish pattern, but the difference here is that comparing to the bear flag, we see meandering over here, and it's just meandering, nothing really to it. But over here we see a meandering, or at least a price expansion, and this illustrates it perfectly because this price expansion is evident in the price swings from bottom to top of the broadening wedge, the ascending broadening wedge. So over here, 9% swing, 10% swing, and if we see continuation here past the 200 EMA resistance area, then it would probably be a 10%, 10.5% swing to the top. So I definitely find value and utility in holding a new perspective, a new updated, fresh perspective in this ascending broadening wedge, and of course still paying respect and adhering to the old technical analysis, the bear flag, which has served us very well until this point. This bear flag still has very relevant areas of market reaction, so I'm still going to use this in conjunction with this chart right over here. So bearing all of this in mind, what am I looking for personally? Well, firstly, let's cycle back to the bear flag. I'd like this bear flag bottom to hold as a support. I want it to continue propping Bitcoin's price up. We didn't see a pullback for a retest attempt, which is a sign of strength, in my opinion, for the time being. But as long as Bitcoin maintains itself above this trend line right over here, then I'm reasonably comfortable with the fact that we might see higher price levels. And if we do see this continuation, then of course this is roughly the region where I'm going to see some rejection. We've got that confluent rejection zone over here. Bitcoin has a lot of historically transacted sell side action at this level, so I'm not going to be too bullish on that area breaking. I don't think it's going to break. Bear in mind that this is a bear flag, and at the same time this is a ascending broadening wedge, so not a lot of bullish sentiment. We've got a lot of bearish sentiment here. We've got a lot of bearish bias within these market structures, and of course we'd have to see this region break. So this hard resistance area would need to break for us to see this trend line be touched, and only if we saw a higher time frame close above it would we see some sort of further upside. But for the time being, all I'm going to be focusing on is price below this level. So that pretty much covers my view on Bitcoin for the time being. If we move on very briefly to Ethereum, because not much has changed also, we saw a breakdown from the higher low, and essentially speaking, this higher low might be flipping into a resistance. We're seeing that bearish confirmation. So bearish confirmation comes in two stages: a breakdown from the higher low and then testing this higher low as a resistance. So Ethereum USD is in the process of potentially flipping this higher low into a new resistance to just confirm that double bearish confirmation. And once that happens, then we might see these levels once again. But of course, we need to have that confirmation. As long as Ethereum maintains the bottom of this weekly channel, which it's in at the moment, then Ethereum should be fine. But for the time being, it's not really developing much. I'm just going to watch for a rejection here and to just see what this confirmation will give to us on the daily time frame. So moving on to Ethereum BTC, we've got a lot more interesting things going on here comparing to the USD pairing. We spoke about this black diagonal resistance weighing down on price, and we spoke about this region being a demand region. We had a lot of historically transacted volume at this level, but we also spoke about the descending triangle. So if you take into account this lower high and this base over here, then it was a descending triangle, and we saw the breakdown. Something we spoke about on multiple occasions in different episodes throughout last week. So we saw that breakdown once again, which inevitably led Ethereum BTC to return to this level, which we marked out last week already. So essentially speaking, we are seeing some small market reaction, but I am going to be focusing on this black diagonal resistance. And it is quite interesting because we saw a descending triangle already resolve itself. This one in particular, I hope you can see this one. This is this descending triangle, the lower high and the base and the breakdown right over here. And we might be seeing another one, but I wouldn't be too fast and too quick to call this in of itself a descending triangle, because even though it has that sentiment, that bearish sentiment, it doesn't have that consistent base action of price just bouncing off the base of the descending triangle, because after all, price was at these levels for a while. So while I'm not going to be quick to call this a descending triangle, it does have that sentiment, it does have that bias, because it does have that lower high diagonal resistance and the base. So we are going to see quite a lot of price compression as Ethereum BTC starts to coil in towards the apex of this so-called triangle, and this lower high will probably be that sort of strong diagonal resistance that is going to continue to weigh down on price and finally force Ethereum BTC into a breakdown past this support. And of course, that's something I'd be watching for. I'd be watching for that confirmed breakdown, because once we get that confirmed breakdown, we're going to see a strong drop in Ethereum's price. So that's something I'm going to be watching for in terms of Ethereum BTC, in terms of its price compression and coiling into the apex of this so-called triangle. We are going to see a trend decision soon once we see one of these levels give way. And that's about it for today's market update. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It looks very similar to this. Just please click the like icon if you've enjoyed this video. And if you'd like to see further videos in the future, please click the red button, the subscribe button, to keep in touch. And of course, if you have some comments, if you have some thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Please leave a comment down below. And I'd like to leave you with a positive piece of news that this Halloween, you can treat yourself to a $30 discount on all of my courses using the discount code Halloween. As we know, Halloween is just around the corner, so if you'd like to have $30 off my technical analysis course or my risk management course, go ahead, use the discount code Halloween, and you'll be able to take $30 off the course. And you can do this with not only the technical analysis course, but you can also do that with the risk management course. So if you'd like to get both of them, you'll save $60 on both courses, which is an amazing deal. And of course, I've uploaded a brand new video last week to the risk management course, so that's awesome as well. So if you'd like to save $30 on each course, check out the links down below and use your special discount code Halloween. And that's about it for today's market update. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm Rect Capital, and I'll speak to you soon.